Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. Today we are joined by Dr. Aamir Hussain, who is a research associate. So welcome, Dr. Aamir. How are you
Hi
doing?
mate,
You
how you
okay?
doing? Yeah, not too bad. How are you? Okay.
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, thanks for joining us today.
No, thanks for having
Um,
me. I'm looking forward to it.
so as we always do on this series, we bring on a guest from the industry and we get them to talk a little bit about their background, how they got into where they are, and some of the realities of their work. But just before we jump into the questions, do you want to just give us a quick overview of what it is you do, your job title, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I am a research associate at University of Leicester. I'm actually based at Glenfield Hospital because the research is quite clinically based, and we work with a lot of patients. So the lab is actually based in the hospital, and my research is looking at why do people who have severe life-threatening asthma, why do they not respond to kind of inhalers or steroids over time? So we call this kind of resistance. The person is resistant to set therapy. So it used to work for a time and then it doesn't anymore. So you work and try to understand within the body, so proteins, molecules that you're probably learning in biology, for those of you who do biology, is what is changing inside the body that's causing that person to become resistant. Because as we know, somebody who has asthma and they have an exacerbation, it's going to be a bit of a problem if they can't respond to an inhaler or steroids. So we look at three different ways. How can the person prevent it? So what can we do to prevent that resistance? What could we do to reverse that problem, that resistance? So they have resistance, can we reverse it? And then finally, how can we combat that resistance? So people who have life-threatening asthma, where they go to intensive care, they can actually respond to conventional type of therapies. So that's kind of a nutshell as to kind of the research that I do in this role.
Brilliant. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of different components to what you're doing, and I can imagine at the moment that's a really important area of research. You know, obviously
Uh,
with respiratory problems being part of COVID. Uh, must
For
be,
sure,
yeah,
there's a lot. Now that I realize there's so many avenues, many people around the world who are in kind of respiratory science research, looking at angles at how does COVID kind of causes that respiratory distress syndrome, and how we can use some of the research that we have to try and understand it better, and hopefully try and prevent it. And that's obviously the main idea.
definitely. In terms of your journey, so starting out and then becoming a research associate, how did that work? How did you end up where you are now?
So if you go from A levels, let's say start from there. I did biology, chemistry, physics, and then maths at A level, AS. I know it's kind of trying to change right now. I actually didn't do too well in A levels. I got a D in biology, and then when I got to university, I did biomedical science. So 2 years at college, also now 3 years at university. And towards the end of my time at university, I started to get my head screwed on to realize, right, what do I really want to do in life? I don't want to just work here. I think there's more to me than just that. So then I started to become more kind of relentless in my pursuit of a career, and I enjoyed the research. I did research in my third year, so I opted to do a PhD, and the PhD was 4 years, and then I've been working since then in different roles, and then I've become essentially kind of like a research associate now. So if you were to add it from college, you're looking at close to about 9 to 10 years. I know it sounds like a lot, but if college is generally education. Many people may or may not go to university, so it's kind of like post-university. It's been, let's say, 5 years, so PhD and then work. So yeah, combination of quite a few years of different things to get to where I am now.
It's quite an interesting progression, though. Really, like you're saying, you didn't feel like you did that well at A levels, but then you actually ended up staying in education for quite a long time and really committing to making that part of your future. So I think that could be inspiring for a lot of people, actually.
I think that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to kind of come on board, is to say that I'm not saying that you do badly in A level, it doesn't matter. But for whatever reason that you may not do well, it doesn't mean it's the end of your life or the end of your career. Because, I got, for those who obviously were watching, I got a D in biology, I got a C in chemistry. And then I thankfully now have a PhD in pharmacology, which is both chemistry and biology combined, which is one of the highest forms of kind of accreditation you can get. And it took me a while to get up to that speed of being more aware. And so don't realize that, or don't feel that, okay, if I didn't do well in my A levels, it's the end of my kind of career. Because thankfully for me, it wasn't. It was a lot of hard work though. I'm not saying that it was easy in university in my first degree. I didn't do a master's, which is generally kind of recommended. So it's a big jump. So, but hard work and the right focus generally does make a big difference, as it did for me.
Definitely. So I want to move on a little bit to, some of the realities of your work as well. In terms of people that might want to get into this sort of thing, have you got any aspect of it that you've enjoyed the most? What's been your favorite part of doing the research to date?
I think a few things. One, if you were to look at it from a job point of view, research is incredibly flexible. There is no day that's the same. It is not repetitive. You're not behind the desk doing the same thing day in, day out, where many other jobs do. And that might be great for a lot of people who want a routine or want the same thing day in, day out. But somebody like me, I didn't want to have something repetitive. I wanted something new, exciting, different. It's always changing. Every few months we're looking at something different. So I think the notion that not every day is the same is a big favorite of mine. And flexibility, I never wanted a 9 to 5 job, no matter how much it paid, because it was against what I wanted to do as a career. And job satisfaction is great within research because it's fun. You're doing really cool experiments, you're making a difference in the field. It doesn't have to be within science. It can be art, history, it can be English, it can be whatever, it can be engineering. But you're making a difference to a field. And I think that's a big favorite of mine, that I'm contributing to new knowledge. I'm creating new knowledge that's benefiting, in my case, patients who have a very difficult condition. And I'm trying to, we've seen the research before I even started, make a difference. And I'm hoping to do the same. So yeah, a few things: flexibility, nothing's the same, and then making a big difference to a field. A few favorites of mine.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a very rewarding job. Yeah, like you say, it's contributing something positive. So yeah, it must be rewarding at times.
One other thing I do want to add actually on that is
Yeah,
I get to use fancy equipment, really cool, tech, and I'm quite a tech kind of person. So fun gadgets, fun equipment, resources that you wouldn't expect that actually exist. You think it was in sci-fi, but we do use them. So that's been another fun aspect of research.
definitely. Yeah. In terms of skills and I suppose outside of qualifications itself, like what personal skills do you think people might need to do well?
I think a lot of people may not realize that research is a very fast-paced kind of life. Um, you have to be able to adapt quickly, because when you're doing research, you're doing experiments. In my case, things change quite quickly. From the data and the results you gather, you might be doing something else. So you've got to learn quickly how to do something else. But I think the biggest thing is that when you look at research, you're essentially trying to solve a problem. So problem solving skills is massive for research, because my whole PhD was trying to solve a problem, right? I had a question, and then I did research to try and solve that problem. And within it, you've got many problems. So being able to improvise, being able to adapt, think on the spot, being able to methodically think of an issue. So troubleshooting is a big thing, because unfortunately, many experiments don't work. So you have to try and figure out why. And you've got to think of it in a systematic way to rule out this, rule out that, rule out this, and you realize, oh, okay, that's why it didn't work. So I think amongst time management, amongst the kind of generic soft skills that you talk about, I would say the biggest is problem solving. Presentation is another one, because you have to do a lot of presentations, conferences within your lab team. You'll be working with a lot of different people from around the world. So the whole time management, public speaking, utilizing various skill sets in IT. I think if I was to pick out one in particular, it would definitely be kind of problem solving and being able to adapt quickly.
Yeah, definitely. That makes sense. Another thing we want to talk about, I guess I kind of probably know the answer to this based on stuff that you've said. Um, what do you think is valued more, work experience or qualifications? Obviously, for you, you obviously went down the kind of academic route. Is there work experience that's relevant to this kind of stuff if someone was looking to do that?
Yeah, definitely. Now, I know I went down doing a degree and then went to do a PhD. And generally, if you're going into research, most often, not always, but most people go down that route. But those are maybe qualifications, but a lot of it is within work experience. So if I was going back now, if I was a college student and I wanted to do research, I would be knocking on every university research center around my area to say, look, Can I do some work experience? Can I see what you do? Because when I go into university and I've said that I've done this, or even while I'm still at university, I'm doing work experience in the days that I'm not there, it makes a big difference, because when you're going to apply into research, at that stage and that phase in that career, work experience is massive, because you're not expected to publish anything because you're not doing research yet. So the question is, why should I pick you to do a PhD or to be a researcher? You said that you've got a lot of experience in doing this or doing that, or you're part of this group or part of that group. So I think early on, work experience is huge, but once you get to kind of the PhD route forward, it's qualifications in the sense of being able to publish research. So many other people have kind of accreditations. So a few friends of mine who are in accountancy, they're judged on their portfolio, how many clients they have, right? And that's kind of judged by the maybe work experience or what tax qualifications. But for me, it's about research I publish, which I class as more qualification than work experience. So yeah. So I think work experience early on, and then qualifications as you progress and go forward.
We've already, I think you've already given some valuable insights for people. But in terms of like, if we can offer some specific advice, if someone knows that they want to get into research, what would you suggest for them?
I think the biggest thing is, if you want to go into research, you're going to ask yourself, one, why? Two, which area of research you want to go into. Is it engineering? Is it more health and life sciences? Is it more kind of art and design? Is it more kind of humanities? I think if you're at this stage where you're in college right now, you want to figure out, what do you enjoy doing and what do you see yourself doing as a research kind of career. So doing for many years. I've been doing kind of respiratory sciences now and research for 3 or 4 years. I did kind of vascular, so cardiovascular type of work in my PhD for many years. So I enjoyed that type of research. So I think the question is, go out and explore. So my advice would be, speak to people who, again, social media is a big game changer now for research, because you can actually follow people who are doing the type of research you might want to do. And you can ask them questions, which is what I mentioned about showing my Instagram page. So if you're interested in kind of science-based research, feel free to ask me, and follow us while we're doing research. Follow the YouTube videos. So I think it's exploring and connecting with people who are doing the type of research you may want to do, and you might change your mind. So when I was doing a lot of advice for people who are university students, I said you, but when you try it, you hate it and you want to do something else. So I think even if you're at college level, just explore, try it out, do work experience any way you can, different universities, different departments. Just try it out. Maybe do some experiments in engineering, and then go do science, or go do microbiology, or go do accountancy. There's research in business and law as well. So there's a whole variety of research. But my advice is explore, try it out, work with people who are experts, and see what they can do.
Yeah, for sure. It sounds like there's quite a few elements to like self-discovery, as well as obviously the practical things that people can go out and try and do as well. So yeah, just thinking deeply about what it is you want to study. Did you ever have any doubts in terms of where you wanted to go in terms of areas of research?
Yeah, massively. So when I was doing biomedical science in my 3rd year, I was doing kind of like a little mini work part-time placement, and that's when I discovered medicinal chemistry, which is kind of more pharmacy related. I enjoyed that, but then throughout my PhD, when I saw what can be done in it, I didn't realize that that's kind of my trajectory, that's my career path. And I went into more than kind of nutrition, preventative kind of understanding, so more pharmacology from an exercise point of view, nutrition point of view, which is some of my kind of subset areas. So it has changed, but what I did know is that I wanted to do fun experiments. And if you speak to professors, you ask them that for many of the early part of the years, they did many different things until they found what they love or they found what they enjoyed. And then they worked very hard to push into that field. So I think, yeah, I thought I would do more kind of chemistry-based research, making compounds and drugs and testing them. But I kind of moved away from that to looking at more fitness, nutrition, and then looking at how certain conditions are, i.e. Severe asthma, and trying to find out a way to try and improve the current treatment that we have. So more biology and pharmacology related. So yeah, it has changed for me for sure. It has.
In terms of the job itself, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but
Yeah.
do you have a typical kind of schedule that you work on, or is it varied?
It is varied. If I was to say, if I was to pick between fixed and varied for research, for sure it's varied, because you don't have a typical 9 to 5 type of work. And you speak to any researcher generally from any discipline, especially the quantitatives. What I mean by that is a lot more hard sciences, so being in some form of laboratory, running experiments of some sort. It's always varied, because if you're growing cells in the lab, you might be growing cells, you have to wait for them to grow. So you're not doing anything the rest of that day, and then you may be coming the next day. Sometimes you have to come early morning to start an experiment. Sometimes you have to start late night because it's different time points, right? Sometimes you have to work on the weekends, and sometimes you can take Friday off. And it all depends on how that research is going at that week. But you do plan ahead. So you do, right, I'm going to get this done, that done, that done. So the beauty, as I mentioned, about one of my favorite parts of research is you kind of govern when you work to some degree. So when you get to kind of a PhD level, and then after, you're kind of deciding when you want to do experiments. As long as you can fit it in a week, you're getting enough work done, you're kind of left to your own devices. So the notion of, submitting timesheets or being micromanaged isn't that often seen in research, unless you have kind of a really bad supervisor. So what I've enjoyed is that the hours are varied. So for example, the reason why I'm mentioning this is, let's say you want to go out in the afternoon to meet some friends. Obviously, COVID is a bit difficult at the moment, but you want to go and maybe go to London and see a few friends. You can plan your experiments in such a way that you allow yourself to do that in the week. Whereas somebody else who has a 9 to 5 job, they can't. It's rigid. They can't do anything else, and that's something I've really, really been grateful for, because, as you know, I make YouTube videos. So sometimes I plan my experiments in such a way that it's running, and I can come home and record videos. And then by the time it's finished, I can go back to work and then carry on. So yeah, it is varied. It is varied, but it depends on the type of research that you do.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it can be a positive. So just talking again about the job, people might now have a bit of an idea of what being a research associate entails. Is there anything that you think, maybe you didn't know before you started and has been a surprising part of the job?
Yes, and again, I wanted to be as honest as I can here. So for the people who are aware of the pros and cons, I know that was one of your questions, but for this point, I would say you might have seen in other type of jobs, in corporate jobs, there's a lot of politics. There's a lot of office politics. There's a lot of people trying to stifle each other, and that is also found in research. Research can be quite cutthroat, can be quite ruthless as well, because let's say, for example, two research groups at two different universities are doing the same type of research. One wants to publish their research quicker than the other person, because otherwise they lose that novelty, they lose that wow factor that they were the first or they proved this. So sometimes it can be quite secretive, too confidential. But right now, there's a lot more openness in research, making things more collaborative. But it can be quite ruthless, where professors and supervisors can be quite secretive and be quite sometimes harsh to make sure nobody else steals their work, which is understandable. But if you thought, research was free of, politics and, drama like that, unfortunately, sometimes it's even worse. There's people who have fallen out with each other, because they did this research quicker than them, or they copied their work, So for those of you who copy, you shouldn't, of course. But if you have copied other people's work, people do that on a bigger scale in research, and that can cause a lot of problems. So yeah, politics, that type of thing is also something that surprised me a lot. I did not think it would be that bad, but I'm trying to look at it on the general picture. Any job you do also has politics, but I just wanted to make sure that research, unfortunately, also has that politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something I thought about either, actually. But now, when you say the reasons and how that manifests, it does kind of make sense, actually. Um, so back to, like, I guess we've talked a little bit about this anyway, but if you really had to pinpoint the most rewarding thing out of some of the points you mentioned, what is it for you?
I think for me personally, so this is more on a personal note, that unfortunately my mother suffers from severe asthma, and I've seen the clinical side of what happens when research progresses. So I've seen what happens in the lab, and then also what happens in the clinical care setting. So when paramedics are around, when doctors are around in hospital, and I've seen how certain medications or certain changes in a person's therapy came from research. And something that I like to talk about, because I talk about a lot because I love research that much, is everything comes from research. So the iPad I'm talking to you on came from research. Engineers designed it. The glasses that you might be wearing, the guitar that's behind you, the food that you ate yesterday, the packages, everything came from some form of research. Engineers, doctors, consultants, even art and design people, the clothes that you might be wearing came from research. Fashion designers design how can I make something more comfy, more waterproof. So I think rewarding thing for me is that anything you see in life came from some form of research, and to know that I'm this particular form of research is incredible, and I've loved every minute of doing research. It's a hard grind, but the rewarding thing is that you're, in a nutshell, helping some people in life, and for me, it's people who have severe asthma.
Yeah, definitely. It's yeah, you put that really nicely when you think about it. It's it kind of informed everything. So yeah, very rewarding. So in terms of pros and cons, I know we've talked about some of the difficulties, some of the positives. Can you maybe just summarize some of those things so people can kind of yeah, go
on. Start with the dessert first. Start with the pros. Some of the pros is that, as I mentioned, it's flexible. You know, you are governed, or you're left to your own devices with the time to make sure you utilize it to the best of your ability in a week. But if you want to do things during the week, if you want to play sports or you've got other hobbies, you can better incorporate them into a week as opposed to maybe having a more of a rigid structure. Nothing's the same, so I'm not doing the same thing every day. Things change. You get to learn different techniques. You do different research. You get to work with fantastic people around the world. The great thing about research is that it's very international. You know, you work with a lot of people who are from overseas, who are PhD students or professors, or you name it, and they're on board, and you get to go abroad as well. And something that I didn't mention about research before as a pro is that when things are going well, you get to go to conferences, and these conferences are in some fantastic places around the world. You know, people go to conferences in Hawaii or in what people think as holiday destinations. You get to go as a researcher, submit your research in a presentation at a conference, and then you get to enjoy that city for a few days. So traveling is a big thing within research, so that's a huge pro that maybe other jobs may not be able to facilitate. And like I said, it's quite rewarding. It's also fun. And I think I want to stress that as well, is that I get to do really cool and fun experiments and figure out if this is working or if that's working. And for me, I know it's not for everybody, but for me, that's quite fascinating because it's not mundane, it's not boring, in my opinion. I've never seen research as work. It's quite fun. There are times where it's difficult, I will admit, but nothing's the same. And I think when you experience that, you realize that, wow, I don't want to do the same thing every day. This is quite new. And as we know in life, we get bored of the same things generally over time. You have a new phone, iPhone, you get bored of it, you want to get a new one, or clothes. So my job doesn't allow me to get bored because it's something new quite often. So that's the pro. But now, unfortunately, the vegetables, the cons, is it is hard work. If you were to look at it from a monetary point of view, so in terms of like how much you get paid, there are many other jobs. Now, I did a PhD for 4 years of work. So post-university, you can say, let's say it's 4 or 5 years of extra work. Now, one of my friends who are doing the same degree as me, they'll probably be earning maybe even twice as much or more than me if they went into industry. So you can say non-research point of view, or being a teacher or doing other things. So if earning money is your kind of goal, and if it is, that's fine. There are probably other better ways to do it, which are more of a headache. One of the cons is that when you get to a lecturer point of view, that's when job security is a great pro. It's very hard. You see lecturers getting fired or being made redundant. But to get to that stage is a huge con because it's sometimes very difficult to get to that stage. It's a lot of trying and doing work till late nights, sometimes for free, to get to the point where you get the opportunity to get a lectureship. And then when you're in, then it's great. Life is flexible. You get to do what you want to a certain degree, and you're kind of safe job wise. So there's a few pros and cons, but I think for me, the pros at the moment outweigh the cons for sure.
Always has to be that way, doesn't it? And nothing's perfect, but it sounds like there's a lot of positives there, and I'm almost convinced to go into research now. I guess just before we wrap up, maybe a good thing to end on would be misconceptions. If anyone has a particular idea, maybe of what it is you do, is there anything that you could say that might think get them to think differently? You know, is it like it people see in films, for example, or is the reality slightly different?
Yes and no. I think one of the biggest misconceptions I thought when I was at college is that you have to be like a super duper clever person to do research, right? You have to smash your A levels, do really well in university, and then those are the only people who get to do research. And I'm a product of that not being true. You know, I did not do very well in my levels. I didn't do well in the first part of my kind of degree. I think a lot of people talk about with research is more perseverance than intelligence. Yes, you have to be able to understand complex things, but that's with any job, you know. You learn as you develop. But having this prerequisite that you have to be, you know, super clever, you have to memorize everything and have an eidetic memory is not the case, because I certainly am not that. But I've been doing pretty well in research so far, thankfully, and it's been because of my perseverance more so than my intelligence. And the more you persevere, the more the intelligence grows, right? Because the more you're sticking at it, the more you focus, and naturally become more attuned to the research or the area of work that you're doing. So I think that's a big misconception that it's only for the super elite or clever people, but it's not. You know, some of the greatest scientists ever were not that, but they had great ideas because it's the way that you think, right? It's not just how much you memorize, which is unfortunately a lot of the case for many other kind of professions. Whereas this is how hard you work, how you think, how you adapt quickly, how you think of ideas outside the box. The last thing I want to mention on this kind of misconception thing is many research ideas are thought outside of the box. You know, where it's not even normal logical thinking of memory retention. Okay, can you connect the dots? This is the area. Many ideas come from you thinking extravagantly, you thinking creatively. So if you have that in you, you know, that's a sign of a great researcher. You know, so rest assured that, again, I am not saying you don't do anything in A levels and do research. No, of course not. But maybe that type of education isn't suited for you potentially. You have to go through it, of course, like I did. I had to go through that education, work really hard to get to the type of research and type of work I want to do, which is more creative and more fun. So yeah, it's not boring either. That's the last misconception as well. It is not boring. It's only boring if you're in the wrong research. That's what I would say. If you don't like the research area, then of course it's going to be boring. But you know, I get to do fun things, get to do interesting things that generate very interesting information that you sit there like, wow, I didn't know the body could do that, or I didn't know I just put that together and I caused that to happen in these cells that have grown, you know. And that, as I mentioned previously in early on in this session, that my job doesn't allow me to get bored, and I think that's a really good thing to have as job satisfaction. You have all the money in the world, but if you don't like to wake up and go to your job, that's not going to get any easier as you get older. So job satisfaction is a big thing.
Definitely. Well, I've learned a lot about what it takes to do what you do. I found it really interesting. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Hussain. Hopefully everyone out there has learned a little bit more, and hopefully you'll be inspired to maybe consider this as a career. Yeah, thanks so much for talking to us today. I've also put your link to your YouTube channel and Instagram in the comments for anyone interested. Make sure you go and check those out.
Super. No, thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed talking. And for those who want to follow the channel or ask more questions, feel free to Instagram me. I'll be more than happy to have a chat with you if you're interested in doing research. So thanks again, Leicester College, and thank you again, Nick.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate it.
No worries.
Have a good night.
Take care. Bye.
See ya.